Welcome back to Turning Hard Times into Good Times. I'm your host, Jay Taylor, and I'm really pleased to have with me Peter Tallman. He's the president and CEO of Klondike Gold. Peter is a geologist. He's been around the exploration world, gold and other minerals, for the past 35 years. The past 20 years, he has been either a founder, director, or senior management positions at various companies, publicly listed companies in Canada. And he's been involved in looking at rocks in Canada, Chile, Mexico, and Australia. Has a very great career. Has really started out with Murray Pezim, I believe, one of the most famous exploration financiers in Canada when I was a young man, anyway. And so, anyway, Peter comes with a lot of background, a lot of history, and a lot of experience, and is very renowned as a top exploration geologist among his peers. Klondike trades in Toronto under the symbol KG, and you can buy it, as I have down here in the United States, under the symbol KDG or KDKGF. 54 million shares outstanding, and it was trading at around 20 cents Canadian earlier today. It really has a very minuscule market cap. If you're looking at it in U.S. dollars, as I do, it's only around $7.5 million, which is just really peanuts for a company that could have many millions. Well, we don't want to say too much yet because we don't know, but the prospects of a very large gold discovery, I think, is not an unrealistic statement. So, welcome, Peter. It's so good to have you with us today.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you very much.
Well, it's very good to have you. I want to ask you. Your property is located near Dawson City in the Yukon, and it's famous for millions of ounces of gold, placer gold, that was found, I guess, starting in the late 1800s, right? And then through the early 1900s, I suppose. Give us a little bit of the history of your Lone Star gold property up there in the Klondike.
Well, it was gold in the district was discovered in 1896, so some 50 years after the discovery of the California gold rush, and the two are very similar. And I think your listeners will be a little more familiar with the California one, but they're almost identical in how they evolved. So in the Klondike, from then, 1896 until now, there's been 20 million ounces of gold pulled from the surface gravels, and I compare that with California, where there's been about 40 million taken out. And over the years, in California, if we go there, there's been 10,000 hard rock showings and little mines and things developed. And in the Klondike, because it's north, hard to get to, and you can't grow, there's no timber resources or there's no farms and things, there's only been 10 bedrock showings found in the entire district, rather than 10,000 in California. California has produced like 100 bedrock mines that have created. It's almost 120 million ounces of gold mined in California over the last 150 years, and out of the Dawson district and the Klondike, there's been 1,200 ounces mined from bedrock. So it's quite a disparity. They actually are very similar geologically, and the potential is also the same. It's just that the Klondike is, it's famous for being hard to get to. If you look it up, you see men trekking up mountains in snow, and a lot of people died trying to get there in the first place. But for Klondike Gold, our company, we've managed to we started acquiring the district 3 years ago, and we've now completed it, and we got it cheap because basically for 100 years nobody has really explored it very well. It's seen little exploration, in fact, and we think it's a jewel that's very underappreciated. So we spent $2 million acquiring the ground, and we've now, over the last 2 years, done 2 years basically worth of ground exploration, and we've made a bunch of discoveries.
All right. Well, Peter, one geologist that looked at your property, I think not very thoroughly, But he came up with the idea that, well, yeah, there's lots and lots of placer gold. It's all been eroded in these gravels, as you described. But that probably most of the gold from the mother lode or from the source is gone. The hard rock, there's probably not much hard rock potential there. Well, you're not in agreement of that, and you'd explain to me why. It's something known as an orogenic deposit. Could you perhaps in layman's terms explain why you're convinced that there's an awful lot more gold to go yet, aside from what you just described in terms of comparing it with California?
Well, and first off, that idea that all the gold has been eroded off and there's none left has been around since the 80s. Mm-hmm. And that's really prevented any investment in the district. It's one of the key reasons why I like it. This gold orogenic model is a relatively new model for gold mineralization. It's really come into its own the last 10 or 15 years, and 20 years ago was barely thought of. Basically applying, and that it means, or the model suggests that faulting and thrusting are responsible for the emplacement of gold, and it suggests where you should go within the rocks to find it. It also suggests that the gold will be coarse and visible, which is what we have. 20 million ounces were all visible. So 2 years ago, we started looking around at these geophysical targets and old workings at surface, and we've spent 2 years drilling them. And we now have 3 distinct zones of continuous mineralization. You were talking in your preview about Novo Resources, which I know well. Mm-hmm. And one of your promos was you had a couple of ounces over a couple of meters. So 2 years ago, we discovered a gold zone at Gay Gulch that runs 76 grams over 2.8 meters. Mm-hmm. So, and since 2 years ago, late as well, another zone at Nugget was 5 grams over 14 meters, which we've been drilling since then. And then just recently, this morning, for the first time, we announced a zone, basically a new discovery at Lone Star. Lone Star is one of the 10 historic underground workings in the Klondike. And during the turn of the century, that's the one that was mined and produced 1,200 ounces. Mm-hmm. So we had a new look at it and said, you know what, there's a lot of potential there, especially applying this orogenic model. And so we basically stepped to one end of it. We determined that there was a 700-meter strike length of good-looking material with quartz staining and visible gold. And the first 2 holes we announced this morning were on the western end of that. And we have another 15 holes to come. We don't have assays for. They look nice and core. And that goes across 700 meters of strike length.
Okay.
And so to answer your first question, is there gold, is it all eroded away? Well, no.
Not all.
Because we've managed to find, we own the district, so we have basically, again, going back to California, if you imagine the California gold rush and one company controlling all of the ground that underlay the California gold rush, we have that in the Klondike. We own every bit of it, and it's in the same size and scale as what was in California. So when we have gold in bedrock, one end to the other of it, and in 3 different places now, we have zones that have implied tonnage. They're certainly economically interesting.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And we know whether they're economically viable. That's quite a ways away yet, I suppose.
Yeah, well, really, it's still the first level of effort here is to prove to the rest of the world that there's gold there, because many people don't believe it because of some of the previous work.
Yeah.
And so it is a systematic approach, especially now that we own the belt. And there are differences from one end of the belt to the other that we're still trying to understand. But what we've been able to do so far is prove for sure there is lots of gold there. Mm-hmm. We have a good handle on locally in some places where the gold is, and so we're just going to continue exploration to find it.
Mm-hmm. Peter, the grades you talked about in your press release today, 2.4 grams over 37 meters and 6.6 grams, I guess, included in that intersection of 7 over 7 meters, 7.05 meters. Is that sort of similar to what the grades were at the mined out before in the 1,200 ounces? Do you know about that?
The Lone Star mine, the one that operated in the early 1900s, I think they were mining things in the 1,000-gram range.
Yeah.
And we have found samples. We found one of the veins that they did mine, which ran between 1,000 and 1,500 grams, so whatever that 50 ounces, say. And back then, that would have been economic at $20 an ounce. Mm-hmm. The 1 ounce material that we find typically in quartz veins only, so they tend to be relatively small, but the 1 ounce back at turn of the century probably wasn't economic, and that's what's in the area, the waste rock around this old mine. So the difference today is we have discovered disseminated gold within a particular unit. And it also has quartz veins in it, so you see grades pick up when you get the quartz veins. But the good news is there's these broad areas of disseminated gold in the host rock, and that's what it's the 2 to 3 grams over very wide widths. And I'll add to that, all of that is directly at surface, and it's in a soft, friable rock that we could dig up with a backhoe. Oh. So it is an attractive target. For basically a very simple gold deposit if it turns out to be that scale.
Sure. How soon do you expect to report the remaining assays from this year's drill program?
Going to be scattered over the next. The latest could be as late as very early January, and that's really only because we had a power outage in Vancouver. And the lab lost a bunch of our samples and had to go back to the pulps and redo them from scratch. Oh. And so we lost. Well, basically, it was a storm. Hey, things happen. Yeah. So there's a couple of extra weeks been added to our assay stream. It wasn't just us; it affected all of our clients. But there you go.
Could you give us just a sense of what the magnitude or I don't know how many of these structures that you've identified, but those that you have, give us a sense of the magnitude of the target size here, what you're looking at.
So the larger structures that we can see cut through, so the scale of our property itself, it's 50 kilometers long, so 30 miles by 5 to 10 miles wide. Wow. And what we've done is staked the major controlling through-growing structure, which runs from one end of the property to the other, so 50 miles long. And there are major splays off that, which are 5 to 10 miles each. Oh. And there's probably 20 of those, and those directly control where the gold is situated. And now we've gone back, and part of the work over the last 2 years is to image this with more detailed magnetics, and we see subsidiary structures off those, and one of those we drilled at Gay Gulch and got 76 grams over 2.8 meters, so that's a subsidiary or tertiary order structure off these big ones. So you're looking at, hundreds of kilometers of strike potential. It's a silly number, whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's big.
It's a big number. Well, we're just about out of time here. So, but I have to ask you, you're going to be doing a lot of drilling next year, the way it looks. If the gold markets hold up, as I expect they will, you're going to be doing a lot of drilling. How's your treasury right now? We can drill into June or July. We'll have about $1 million to start. We will be doing a money raise sometime then. I think the drill results will support that. We have we have several billionaires for shareholders who are very supportive. So we don't have a problem accessing capital. And actually another thing I'll note is that our neighbors are Gold Corp and Kinross. And Gold Corp just recently bought Kaminak for a little over $500 million, and Kinross in
say 2011, 2012, paid $130 or $140 million to buy Underworld. And Goldcorp are now developing the Coffee Project. Their haul road runs right through our property. And lastly, we're right on the outskirts of Dawson. It means that we can start earlier and work later and work way cheaper than anybody else in the Yukon because we're basically on a highway, on an airstrip, or on an airport, rather.
Oh, that's very, very helpful, no doubt about it. We're going to have to wrap it up now. Anything else you'd like to make sure people hear on this first time that you're telling your story to our people?
Well, I'm actually enjoying listening to that. I enjoyed your first speaker, and I like technical analysts. So one thing I'll say is that U.S. dollar gold prices are great. Canadian dollar is less than the U.S., so we have a huge advantage. So in dollar terms, we're at 1,800, 1,900 Canadian gold, and that also is a distinct advantage for gold explorers in Canada.
No doubt about it. Well, thank you very much for being with us, Peter, and we'll look to do it again sometime. I'm looking forward to seeing you up at the Metals Investor Forum in Vancouver in just a little more than a week or so, I guess, from now. And I look forward to keeping up with your story and having you on again sometime in the near future so we can let our listeners know how you're progressing. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Jay. I enjoyed it.